Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of Think Clinical Podcast. My name is Hamza. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is going to be another exciting episode. I like this episode because it taught me a lot when I was practicing very, very actively clinically, and just some of the challenges that I had, because if you've practiced for a long time, you will know that patients will lie to you, and especially when it comes to their medications, whether they are taking it or not. When it comes to certain habits that you've told them to stop, and they'll lie to you. Did you stop drinking? Yes, I did. Or you stopped drinking, didn't you? Yeah, I did. So, or you took your medications this morning, didn't you? Yeah. Or you take your medication often, don't you? Yeah, I do. So we've had all those things, and it's a very easy process. But so when I was researching into this, it just made a lot of sense, because patients lie to us constantly, and unfortunately, when that happens, it leads to very preventable deaths. And you do realize that the toll it has on the economy and just the amount of resources from the family and everybody else that goes into some of these complications is just ridiculously high. So this is going to be another uncomfortable one, unfortunately, especially if you're a provider, because you need to stay with me and you need to understand that the fact that the patient is lying to you is not they should take some responsibility for it, but I want to challenge you today to understand that it's your fault that patients lie to you. And once we go through the approach and we go through some of the thoughts that I have to share with you today, you will understand why I'm strongly believing that this is something that's your fault. So and we have to look at this from the point that we have judged patients in the different and difficult ways. We've called them difficult patients, which we feel is a good way to take the responsibility away from us, right? So we have to be willing to get this into the distance. So before I talk about anything, and if you followed my channel for a while, you do understand that I would always talk about the gravity of the situation. How big? What's the scale of this problem? Patients who don't take their medications as prescribed, we have about 50% of those at a time. That's a huge number. Half of your patients that you give medications to, or you give directions not to drink, not to smoke, not to do something else, they go back and do it. About a quarter of all prescriptions are never even filled. Half of all medication-related hospital admissions trace back to non-adherence. And the price tag on all of this, unfortunately, in healthcare is death. And a lot of morbidity, which is so expensive, and it's cost a lot of money. There are 125,000 preventable deaths a year. 125,000. And this is something that should really sit with you as you look at this episode really well. So sit with that. Because out of this and the complications of these, we spend over $100 billion a year in some of these issues. And this is not an edge case. This is one of the largest line items in the entire system. So you have to look at this very carefully. And here's the detail that reframes the whole thing. Researchers estimate that as much as 80% of non-adherence is very intentional. So it's not that they forgot. The patient made a decision that I'll go back, I'll also have that drink. I'm not going to take my medication, or I'm still going to have that smoke, or a combination of everything else, right? It's very intentional. And that's what makes it dangerous. They made a decision. Either they feel they can afford it, so I probably take one today and take one after 3 days just so that it can last me longer. Or the side effects, they just don't want to admit. And I've had patients who probably stopped taking their medication because they felt it was the cause of their erectile dysfunction. Sometimes they have an underlying condition that has an effect on the erection, but they think because they're taking this medication, that's what is probably causing their erectile dysfunction, and they stop. I've had patients pull out their own catheters, and they come back to the ER with bad retention, urine retention, acute urine retention episodes that need to be managed. So they made a choice not to allow, but the second choice they made, that's where the danger is the concealment. So they then made a choice intention not to follow the instruction, maybe because of cost or side effects or whatever it is. But the second one is what the issue is, the concealment, the ability for them to tell you a lie or not tell you the truth. That's where the issue is. There's a quote I love, and it's about 2,400 years old. And this is from Hippocrates. He warned physicians to keep watch on the faults of the patient, which often make them lie about taking of things prescribed. We have known patients lie to us since the literal dawn of medicine. What we still haven't fully accepted is why. And the why is what mostly I hope we'll be able to get through today. So, how do we as healthcare professionals, how do we as doctors engineer some of this lie? Let me make the design argument concrete, because it's not about asking you to feel guilty. I'm asking you to look at this. Start with the question itself. There's a brilliant observation in the family medicine literature. How you ask determines whether you get the truth. So when you ask a question like, you're taking your medicine every day, aren't you? Any person who is listening to something like this will give you the answer that makes them morally justified and reduces the embarrassment if they are not taking their medicine. So the obvious answer would be what? Yes. That's the design. A single sentence, engineered, usually accidentally, to manufacture a false yes. So this is where I want to start this conversation from as we peel off the layers. Now, layer on the power dynamic, right? So now you are asking them questions that makes them feel there's only one answer to. Layer that with the power dynamics, because now you're walking into a room, you have a patient who has changed, they're in a gown, in a very unfamiliar environment. You walk in with your white coat, with your stethoscope, maybe with a team of other junior doctors coming in to examine this patient. That alone already puts them in a difficult situation. So then again, that's a second layer to it. Then it's going to be then there's a rush, because now you have reduced time per visit, less room for the patient to even surface the real story, whether it's the cause concern, whether it's the side effect, whether it's the fact that they never understood the plan in the first place. When the visit is compressed so much, so we are looking at layers of things. You started with the way you asked the question, and then you came down and added the extra layer of power dynamics, which some of us are aware of, some are not. Most of us are not, because you put this patient in an unfamiliar environment in a very vulnerable state, and you come in and there's no empathy with the kind of conversation you're having with them. And then there's a rush, because now you are trying to get through different appointments at the same within a scope of time. And here's a cruel loop that creates. So a diabetic patient cuts back on insulin because of the cost. She doesn't tell you because she's embarrassed. She gets through a rushed visit. Yes, no questions. Her sugar reads high, so you're working with false data and increase the dose because you think she needs more. Now she's on a regimen she can't afford even less, and built on a lie, your own system incentivized. That's not a non-compliant patient. That's a system generating bad data and then acting on it. This is the kind of responsibility and accountability that I expect you to take today. How do we fix this? Because we cannot just come here and celebrate the problem and leave. If dishonesty is designed in, honesty can be designed too. So this is something that we need to look at. One, change the question. Because are you taking your 8 every day? Try a question like, a lot of people have trouble taking their medication consistently. What has it been like for you, right? So the moment you put it that way, they are no longer putting the patient in an uncomfortable situation where they have to tell you what they think is socially acceptable or is acceptable to you medically. They are going to be very open and honest with you. So that question is important. Just make sure they understand that whatever they are going through, if it's the cost, if the side effects, like they're not the only people. So a lot of people go through this. They're like, what has it been like for you, right? The two is to normalize before you ask. Lead with the fact that struggling is common. Most of my patients miss doses sometimes, and cost is a big reason. Is that part of what's going on? Continue with that, right? The third thing is that fix the operational design, not just the conversation, because now you get a conversation right, the operational design has to be. This is the operator's job, and where most clinical advice stops short. Build cost of medication into an intake workflow so that the patient is asked about affordability before they even confess it. Use refill rate data instead of relying solely on self-report. The pharmacy data doesn't get embarrassed. Give staff explicit permission and time to surface barriers. Design a system to ask questions and not rush through them, right? And the fourth thing is that you separate the data gathering from the authority figure. Sometimes the truth comes out more easily to the medical assistant, the care coordinator, the intake form, than the doctor in the white coat. That's not a threat to the authority. That's a smart design. So it builds channels for honesty that don't require the patient to look the boss in the eye and admit failure. And notice that the through line here, every one of these is a design choice, not a personality fix. You're not trying to fix their behavior. You are fixing the design at different points and making sure that you're able to get the right responses from the patients that you have. There's even a growing argument in medical ethics that physicians have a genuine duty here. And when you can foresee a patient being harmed because they can't afford the medication, taking reasonable steps to surface and address that sits squarely with your responsibility. Honesty engineering isn't soft. It's part of the standard practice, and this is something that we all have to be able to comfortably pay attention to and act on when the time is right. So in closing, let's bring this home. When a patient lies to you, you are getting bad data. And every clinical decision built on bad data is compromised, sometimes dangerously, sometimes fatally, or sometimes expensive. That's most often times. We've spent decades framing that bad data as a flaw in the patient. I'm asking you to start seeing it as a flaw in the design, because the design is part of is the part you can actually change as a clinician, and you should be changing. The non-compliant patient is most of the time a person who didn't feel safe enough or have enough time or get asked the right way. They didn't feel the system failed to make honesty affordable. So here's your challenge this week. Take one question you ask most often about meds, about home care, about the thing patients always claim they are doing, and rewrite it so it's easier to answer honestly than to lie. Just one question. Then match what comes back. I think the truth has been waiting for a safer way out the whole time. And that's where the clinical empathy and operational design actually meet. This is another episode of the Think Clinical podcast. Thank you so much, and do have a wonderful, wonderful day.